What if I told you that a rabbit, yes, a rabbit, changed the course of a child's life forever? Not with tricks or trained behavior, but with something far deeper, an unexplainable bond that reached into the quietest corners of a boy's world and brought him back into the light. This is not your typical pet story. It's not about cute ears or fluffy hops. It's about rescue animals who end up rescuing us. About a silent boy, lost in his own mind, and the most unlikely of heroes who helped him find his way. A story filled with real emotion, quiet miracles, and moments that will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. In a world that often overlooks the power of connection, this tale reminds us that healing doesn't always come in hospitals or through words. Sometimes it arrives quietly, on 4 soft paws with a twitch of the nose and a heart full of purpose. If you've ever doubted the magic of pet heroes or wondered how deep the love between humans and animals can really go, this story is for you. It's moving, it's real, and once you start, you won't want to look away. Because sometimes the smallest creatures carry the biggest miracles. No one knew exactly when Jamie stopped talking. His parents said it began around age 3, after a series of confusing medical visits and the heavy word autism settled into their lives. He wasn't unkind or withdrawn, just quiet. He'd spend hours arranging toy trains in perfect lines or staring out the window at the swaying trees. Communication wasn't in words, but in subtle looks, hand gestures, and long silences. It was as if Jamie lived behind a glass wall, present but out of reach. For his parents, Sarah and Mark, life became a delicate dance of hope and heartbreak. They tried everything: speech therapy, sensory playrooms, support groups, but nothing ever felt like it cracked the code to Jamie's world. He wasn't unhappy, but there was an ache in the home. His laughter, once bright and frequent as a toddler, had grown scarce, and the rooms felt quieter than they should have. It was a silence that clung to the walls. Jamie's older sister, Lily, was his closest companion, and even she couldn't always tell what he was thinking. Sometimes she'd sit with him in the yard, both of them watching clouds pass, hoping that somehow he'd speak again. But most days, Jamie seemed content in his own rhythm, as if the world outside moved too fast or too loud for him to want to join in. The doctors said not to expect miracles. Progress would come slowly, and connection might look different than what most families experience. Still, his parents clung to tiny victories: when Jamie made eye contact, when he let them brush his hair without resistance, or when he hummed a song he'd heard once in passing. These were the moments they held on to. Yet beneath all the love and effort, a longing remained, a deep wish for a breakthrough, for something or someone that might gently reach into Jamie's quiet world and invite him out, not with pressure or expectation, but with warmth and understanding. They just didn't know that hope had long ears and a twitching nose. It was early spring when Sarah first noticed a small bundle of white fur hopping through the backyard. At first, she thought it was a squirrel or maybe a cat, but as it moved closer to the flower beds, she realized it was a rabbit. A scruffy, dirt-covered, slightly lopsided rabbit with one torn ear and curious eyes. It didn't seem afraid of people, just cautious, as if it had spent too long fending for itself and wasn't sure who to trust anymore. Jamie was sitting on the porch swing when he saw it. He didn't react at first. He simply watched, his eyes following the rabbit's movements with unusual focus. Sarah noticed this, how his gaze stayed locked on the creature for minutes. That kind of sustained attention was rare for Jamie. She didn't say anything, just took a seat beside him, silently watching too. The rabbit nibbled on a patch of clover, paused, then looked directly at Jamie, nose twitching in the soft breeze. Over the next few days, the rabbit returned, same time, same spot. Jamie began spending more time on the swing, as if he was waiting. He didn't speak, didn't reach out, but something had shifted. He was showing up, watching, engaging. It was a quiet change, but for his parents, it was monumental. Sarah started leaving out bits of carrot and lettuce near the bushes, and every morning, the rabbit came back, growing bolder, hopping closer. One afternoon, Jamie did something unexpected. He stood up from the swing, walked slowly across the yard, and gently placed a carrot near the rabbit's usual path. No one told him to. No therapy plan had suggested it. It was instinct, pure and gentle. And the rabbit? It hopped up to the offering without fear, as if it understood the weight of that simple gesture. The two of them, a boy and a bunny, began a silent ritual that soon became the highlight of every day. In a house once filled with quiet, this small, uninvited visitor brought a new kind of energy. Not loud or dramatic, but hopeful. The kind of energy that made everyone hold their breath, because something was happening. Something that couldn't be explained by any doctor, but felt like the beginning of a miracle. By the end of the week, the rabbit had a name. Lily called him Clover, inspired by the clover patch where he liked to sit, and to everyone's surprise, Jamie didn't resist the name. In fact, one afternoon, he picked up one of Lily's markers and carefully wrote Clover on a scrap of paper. It wasn't speech, but it was something, communication, spontaneous and clear. Sarah found the note later and wept quietly in the kitchen. Clover had become a permanent guest. He no longer darted away when someone approached. Instead, he lounged in the yard like he'd always belonged there. Jamie began to mimic some of Clover's habits, sitting on the grass, nibbling on snacks with him, even hopping gently when no one was watching. It was playful, innocent, and full of unspoken understanding. A boy who had shut out the world was opening a door, one paw print at a time. More astonishing was how Jamie started anticipating Clover's movements. He knew where he'd rest when he'd arrive, and what sounds comforted him. Their rhythms synchronized in a way that words could never capture. Sometimes they'd sit in the fading sunlight, Clover curled against Jamie's legs while he stroked his soft fur in slow, careful motions. It was as if time paused during those moments, just a boy and his rabbit, speaking a language only they understood. Clover seemed to understand Jamie's world. He never made sudden movements, never pushed for attention. He simply existed beside him, calm and patient, always present. Therapists talk about breakthrough tools, strategies, and routines, but no one could have predicted that a stray rabbit would do what years of clinical work couldn't: connect with Jamie on Jamie's terms. Neighbors began to notice Jamie outside more, smiling faintly, showing curiosity. He still didn't speak, but his eyes held a new light. His parents didn't dare call it progress too soon, but they knew what they were seeing, and more importantly, they felt it. Clover had become more than a pet. He was a companion, a quiet hero, a healer. It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray, quiet day where everything feels a bit slower. Jamie was in the living room, staring out the window, watching as droplets rolled down the glass. Clover was nestled in a fleece blanket beside him, his ears flicking gently with every distant rumble of thunder. Lily was coloring at the table, and Sarah was folding laundry nearby, the hum of the dryer filling the silence. It was just another ordinary day, until it wasn't. Clover stirred, shifting closer to Jamie's side. Jamie turned his head and gently laid a hand on the rabbit's back. Then, almost like a whisper slipping through the air, a single word came from Jamie's lips, soft, hesitant, but unmistakable. Clover. The room froze. Lily looked up, eyes wide. Sarah dropped the towel in her hands, not daring to move. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the rain. "Jamie," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. But Jamie didn't say anything else. He just kept petting Clover, calm and content, like nothing unusual had happened. But everything had changed. That one word, spoken after years of silence, cracked something open inside the family. It wasn't just sound, it was hope given a voice. And it carried more weight than anyone could have imagined. The news spread fast. His therapist cried when she heard. Mark, Jamie's dad, rushed home from work and held his son longer than usual that night. It didn't matter if Jamie spoke again the next day or not, he had spoken. Because of a rabbit. Because of love, safety, and the comfort of a bond that asked for nothing in return. That moment rewrote the way everyone saw Jamie's potential. After that, they noticed more little changes. Jamie began humming again. He laughed, really laughed, when Clover did his silly sideways hops or wiggled into Jamie's backpack. His world, once quiet and distant, had started to echo with life. And it all began with one word. A name. A symbol of the friend who had found him when no one else could. As spring turned into summer, Jamie and Clover became inseparable. Wherever Jamie went, Clover was either in his arms, hopping behind him, or peeking out from a specially designed sling Sarah had sewn herself. But with growth comes challenge, and soon that quiet, healing world they had built together began to face its first real test. It started with a letter from the school district. Jamie would need to return to in-person classes in the fall. The idea of school had always been a source of stress for Jamie. The noise, the lights, the unpredictability, it overwhelmed him. His parents had opted for home-based learning, which gave him more comfort and control. But now, with Clover in the picture and Jamie making progress, his therapists believed it might be time. The suggestion sparked anxiety in the house. Even the mention of school made Jamie tense up and retreat. Still, Sarah and Mark didn't want to hold him back. They spoke gently to him, using drawings and calm words to explain what was coming. But it wasn't until Clover hopped into Jamie's backpack and nestled there like it was his natural place that Jamie offered a solution. He wanted to bring Clover with him. No one had expected that. And no one had the heart to say no, not immediately, at least. The school was hesitant, of course. There were allergy concerns, classroom distractions, and policies about animals. But when Sarah explained that Clover was, in effect, Jamie's emotional lifeline and provided documentation from their therapist, something shifted. After several meetings and a lot of persuasion, the school approved it on one condition: Clover would have to pass as a certified therapy animal. It was a long shot, but the family agreed to try. What followed were weeks of training, socialization, and preparation. Clover had always been calm, but now he had to learn how to be unshaken by new environments, noises, and lots of people. The bond between him and Jamie became their greatest asset. Whenever Clover sensed Jamie getting nervous, he'd nuzzle his hand or shift closer. They were learning together. And whether they passed or not, one thing was becoming clear: this rabbit wasn't just a pet. He was Jamie's protector, and they were stronger together than apart. The day of the certification exam arrived with the same weight as a graduation or final performance. Sarah had ironed Jamie's favorite soft hoodie the night before, the one with tiny embroidered stars on the sleeve. Clover had been brushed until his white fur looked like fresh snow, his harness gently buckled in place with a tiny tag that read, "Hope." They left early, with Jamie clutching a small photo of the two of them, his version of a Lucky Charm. The testing center was quiet, but the tension was palpable. Other animals waited with their handlers, mostly dogs, a few cats, but Clover was the only rabbit. He didn't seem fazed. He nestled in Jamie's lap as they waited, occasionally twitching his nose or shifting to stay warm. Jamie didn't speak, but his breathing stayed steady. He kept one hand on Clover at all times, grounding himself through every heartbeat. The test itself was a series of trials: unfamiliar environments, loud noises, unexpected touches. Clover had to remain calm, obedient, and responsive, not just to the trainer, but most importantly to Jamie. When a door slammed during the distraction portion, Clover flinched, but only for a second. Then he pressed himself closer to Jamie, instinctively sensing his needs. Jamie whispered something under his breath that only Clover seemed to hear. And just like that, the moment passed. By the end of the exam, the room was quiet again. The evaluator, a woman named Denise with kind eyes, approached them. She knelt beside Jamie, smiled, and said, "You two make a remarkable team." Then she handed him the certificate. Jamie didn't smile widely, but his eyes lit up like morning sun. He reached out to show the paper to Clover, as if the rabbit could read it, and in that moment, no one could deny that something extraordinary had happened. Back at home, they celebrated quietly. Lily made a little paper crown for Clover and taped it to his head while Jamie watched, amused. Sarah and Mark exchanged a long look across the room, equal parts relief and wonder. Against all odds, the rabbit they'd found in the garden had passed a test built for trained dogs. And more importantly, Jamie had faced his fear, not alone, but with a hero by his side. The first day back at school felt like stepping into a different universe for Jamie. The hallways were louder than he remembered, the fluorescent lights a bit too bright, and the hum of students shifting in their seats echoed in unfamiliar ways. But this time, Jamie wasn't alone. Clover rode gently in a specially designed carrier with mesh sides, resting comfortably against Jamie's chest, his calming presence like armor against the noise. Teachers had been briefed. Students were curious. Most had never seen a therapy rabbit, and certainly not one as composed as Clover. But the school had made accommodations, quiet corners, sensory-friendly options, and most importantly, understanding. Jamie was given space to ease into his routine. And Clover? He adjusted as if he'd done this his whole life. During story time, he sat quietly at Jamie's feet. During lunch, he nibbled Hay's snacks while Jamie picked at a sandwich, calm and focused. There were challenges, of course. One day, a fire drill sent alarms blaring through the building. Jamie froze, covering his ears, overwhelmed. But Clover, startled at first, quickly pushed his small body against Jamie's legs, grounding him. That gentle weight brought Jamie back, helped him breathe again. A teacher watched from a distance, stunned at how effective that silent, instinctive comfort could be. Clover wasn't just a companion, he was an emotional anchor. With each passing week, Jamie participated more. He started pointing at items in class, drawing during art sessions, even handing notes to classmates. They didn't always understand him, but they respected him. and many grew fond of Clover, often greeting him with a soft "Hi, Clover" when passing by. Jamie never corrected them. He liked that they noticed. It made him feel seen, but in a safe, manageable way. What had once seemed impossible had become routine. Jamie didn't just survive school, he began to thrive. His teachers adjusted their expectations, not out of pity, but out of belief in his potential. And every breakthrough, every small victory, was shared with Clover. They arrived together each morning and left together each afternoon. Where Jamie went, his rabbit hero followed, proving to everyone that healing doesn't always need words. Sometimes it just needs a heartbeat that matches yours. Autumn brought with it golden leaves, chilly breezes, and a school-wide event that would change everything, the annual talent showcase. Students were invited to share something meaningful: music, poetry, a story, even just a moment of bravery. For weeks, Jamie said nothing about it. But one evening, as Sarah was preparing dinner, Jamie quietly placed a drawing on the table. It was him and Clover standing on a stage, hand in paw. At first, Sarah thought it was just another piece of Jamie's expressive art. But later that night, he brought it up again, pointing to the drawing and then to himself. He wanted to be part of the showcase. The idea both thrilled and terrified his parents. Jamie had come so far, but being on stage, in front of a crowd, that was a leap they hadn't expected. Still, they knew better than to say no to a door Jamie had chosen to open on his own. They worked with his speech therapist to create a simple presentation. Jamie wouldn't have to speak. Instead, they planned to share a short video of his journey with Clover, narrated by a teacher, while Jamie and Clover stood quietly on stage. It was a story about connection, resilience, and a bond that changed a life. Jamie rehearsed every day, not the performance itself, but simply standing still, holding Clover, facing a small group of family in the living room. The night of the event arrived with all the nervous energy of a holiday. Jamie wore his brave hoodie, the same one from certification day. Clover had a fresh grooming and a bow tie clipped to his harness. The auditorium was full of parents, students, and staff. When it was their turn, Jamie stepped onto the stage without hesitation. Clover nestled calmly in his arms. As the video played behind them, a hush fell over the room. The story unfolded, his struggles, their meeting, and the transformation that followed. By the time the video ended, a few in the audience were wiping their eyes. Jamie stood still, eyes scanning the crowd, heart pounding. And then something extraordinary happened. The room erupted in applause, not polite or forced, but genuine, thunderous. Jamie blinked in surprise, then looked down at Clover, who gave a gentle nudge under his chin. For the first time in public, Jamie smiled. It wasn't wide or showy, but it was real, and it lit up the whole room. After the showcase, something shifted in the community. Word spread quickly, not just about the boy who had faced his fears, but about the therapy rabbit who had helped him do it. One morning, the school counselor pulled Sarah aside with an idea. The local children's hospital was looking for certified therapy animals to visit the pediatric wing. Would Jamie and Clover consider coming in? At first, Sarah hesitated. A hospital could be overwhelming. But Jamie, hearing the word hospital, surprisingly nodded. He even pointed to a picture of Clover and then to the heart on his shirt. It was as if he knew their story wasn't just about healing themselves anymore. It was about giving that healing to others. They agreed, and a week later, Jamie and Clover arrived at the hospital entrance, hand in hand and paw in fur. The visit was gentle and well-structured. They started in the reading room, where a small group of young patients, some with IVs, others with masks, waited with wide eyes. Jamie didn't speak, but he didn't need to. He sat beside each child, placing Clover gently in their lap, guiding their hands if they were unsure. The atmosphere shifted. Children who hadn't smiled in days lit up as Clover twitched his nose or snuggled into their arms. One girl, Emma, who was recovering from surgery, barely spoke. But when Clover was placed next to her, she whispered his name without being prompted. Her mother gasped softly. Emma hadn't spoken a word all week. Jamie watched her silently, then reached into his bag and handed her a drawing, Clover sitting on a cloud, surrounded by stars. She clutched it like treasure. It was a quiet exchange, but everyone in the room felt the magic of it. The hospital invited them back, and soon Jamie and Clover became regular visitors. They didn't cure illnesses, but they brought something medicine sometimes couldn't: hope. And each time Jamie returned home, his shoulders were a little straighter. He was no longer just the boy who had once needed a therapy animal. He was now someone else entirely, a silent healer, carrying light into the darkest places, with a hero rabbit always by his side. Years passed, but the bond between Jamie and Clover only grew stronger. Their story had become something of a local legend, shared in classrooms, featured in community newsletters, even mentioned in national blogs focused on animal rescue stories and pet heroes. Yet to Jamie, Clover wasn't a celebrity. He was still the same soft, twitchy-nosed friend who had once sat quietly beside him in the darkest moments of his life. Clover had aged as all animals do. His hops became slower, his naps longer, but his spirit never dimmed. Jamie, now a teenager, had grown too, but in ways no one could have predicted back when he struggled to make eye contact or express his feelings. He spoke in short phrases now. He laughed with his family. And once, during an interview with a therapy animal organization, he called Clover his light. It was the first time anyone had heard him describe something with emotion, and it hit everyone in the room like a wave. When Clover passed away peacefully in his sleep, nestled in his favorite blanket, the house felt quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Jamie didn't cry, not at first. He simply held Clover's carrier close, as if expecting him to hop out at any moment. But over the following days, he began drawing again dozens of sketches of Clover with wings, guiding lost children through forests, lighting up hospital rooms, resting on the shoulders of kids like him. Inspired by their story, Sarah and Michael created a foundation in Clover's name, promoting pet adoption, emotional pet stories, and funding therapy animal training programs for families with children on the autism spectrum. Jamie helped design the logo. It was a simple silhouette of a boy and his rabbit, side by side, facing the stars. The foundation's motto was something Jamie himself had written: "Sometimes heroes come with fur." Clover's legacy didn't fade. His story traveled through classrooms, hospital wings, and family dinner tables, reminding people everywhere that healing can come from the most unexpected places. For Jamie, Clover had been more than a pet. He had been a bridge between silence and connection, fear and courage. And even now, when Jamie walks through the woods behind their house, he sometimes stops, places a hand on his chest, and smiles. Because he knows some bonds never break. Not all heroes wear capes. Some have fur, whiskers, and a heartbeat that syncs with ours when words fail. Clover was more than just a therapy rabbit. He was a lifeline, a silent guardian, and proof that love doesn't need a language to be understood. Jamie's journey reminds us that healing can come in unexpected forms, and sometimes all it takes is a little kindness wrapped in fur. For every child who feels alone, for every parent searching for answers, and for every animal waiting for a chance to be someone's miracle, this story offers hope. Let this be more than just a story you watched. Let it be something you carry with you. A reminder to believe in the quiet strength of animals, in the beauty of second chances, and in the unseen threads that bind us together. If Clover's journey moved you, imagine how many other animal rescue stories, pet survival stories, and heroic pets are out there, just waiting to be told. Subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and join us as we bring more inspiring tales like this to life. Because at Wild Bounds, every story is a tribute to the incredible bond between humans and animals. And trust me, the next one might just change how you see the world.